Hi, I'm Cecil Maranville, and you're listening to Verse by Verse. Today's podcast features Psalm 4, verse 1. Hear me when I call, O God of my righteousness. You have relieved me in my distress. Have mercy on me, and hear my prayer. This is one of the Psalms written by King David. Many Bibles include some instructions at the beginning. To the chief musician, with stringed instruments, they say. These instructions were meant for the director of worship music in the tabernacle. This psalm was to be sung with musical accompaniment in worship services. Now, undoubtedly, it has been sung throughout the ages, both in the tabernacle and later in God's temple in ancient Israel. In fact, its words are still sung in a hymn in the worship services of the Church of God, a worldwide association, the sponsor of these podcasts. Let's focus today on the words, God of my righteousness. They are central to the meaning of this verse. You have probably heard the expression, the divine right of kings. The American Heritage Education Foundation explains that, begin quote, the divine right of kings was the belief that the king or queen derived his or her authority to rule directly and only from God. The monarch or hereditary ruler was expected to abide by God's moral law. End of quote. But in practice, kings have notoriously decided righteousness, that is, what was right and what was wrong in their particular kingdom, based upon their personal opinions, their personal agendas, their personal desires. In this psalm, David declared that he really looked to the Creator God as the one to define right and wrong. In doing so, David set an example for us today. This is one reason God inspired the psalm to be preserved in Scripture. While we don't rule over a nation, we do rule over our personal life. Do we make life's decisions based upon our opinions, our agendas, or our desires? Or do we govern ourselves based upon God's definition of right and wrong? To do what David did, we must first learn God's thinking, which we can find in the Bible. Then we must consider how this knowledge applies to us personally. Lastly, we must act on God's directions. That requires humility. By nature, all people, including us, are inclined to act more like most kings, making life's decisions based upon personal opinions and preferences. There's more in the verse. David began with, when I call, and he was referring to prayer. That's what calling to or calling on God is, prayer. The God of my righteousness way of living requires that we too communicate with God in prayer, and that we do so regularly. Would you say that many people think of prayer as for emergencies only? They call out to God only in times of great need. If so, then their prayer is not going to be particularly effective or productive. Prayer is a relationship tool, one that has to be used often, just as in human relationships. King David also spoke of his distress. It might seem that anyone living a godly life should be spared from distress. But in fact, some stress is critical to our developing King David's kind of character. As the Apostle Peter later wrote to Christians, Beloved, do not think it strange concerning the fiery trial which is to try you. You can find that in 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 12. Would you like to know how to develop the character of King David? See the show notes for links to our articles, Developing Christian Character, How to Pray Effectively, and Through Many Tribulations.
Verse by Verse is a Life, Hope, and Truth podcast. Check out the show notes to find more free content, like videos, articles, and booklets in our Learning Center.